Yeah, boy.
Just imagine being a history teacher trying to talk about sex and gender in history. Your boring textbook gives you only two choices. Either people in ancient time had the same sexuality as today, just more restrained, or act like non-straight relationship was some weird thing nobody did. But none of that is true. Reality was far stranger and far more fascinating than we imagined. So today, we're exploring civilization where LGBTQ identity was seen as completely normal. To the point where you probably get kicked out of the house by your dad. This isn't some random collection of work posts on X. We are going deep into its culture, one by one. Together, we travel from ancient Rome and Greece to feudal Japan. And after that, we will talk about why people have tried so hard to deny all of this. Because understanding the denial is just as important as acknowledging it.
Oh yeah.
Why start with this era? Because every time people argue about homosexuality, they always bring up this period. Yeah, kinda. But the truth is far more complicated. Ancient Greek didn't categorize sexuality into labels like gay, bisexual, or straight like the way we do today. In classical Athens,
Yeah, boy.
relationship between adult man and adolescent boy was fairly common. And it wasn't just widely accepted, it even became the basis for philosophical thought, with Socrates leading the way. He argued that same-sex love was a noble because it was based on a connection between soul rather than physical desire. The Spartan took it even further by encouraging same-sex relationship as part of military training. A man was accepted to fight beside the man he loved because the warriors would believe to fight harder beside the man he loved. The Seeker Band of Thebes was a proof of this, an elite force made up entirely of male couples, until they were wiped out at the Battle of Chaeronea. But this is where things get complicated because acceptance depends on factors like age, status, and social role. An older man taking the dominant role with a younger partner wasn't seen as unmanly. Meanwhile, if the younger man took the dominant role with an older man, it could be judged as lacking femininity. Today, scholars debate whether it even makes sense to impose modern idea of sexuality onto relationships that existed before the concept did. Okay, but what about women? That brings us to the cave of Lady Chapeau. Chapeau lived on the island of Lesbos and often wrote poetry celebrating love between women. By now, you probably see where the word lesbian come from. Her poetry was filled with lesbian desire. She ran a school where women were encouraged to form emotional and physical bond with one another. So we can see that relationship between women were viewed as one of the highest poetic forms. There are also historical accounts of lesbian relationships written by Greek historians, though far fewer compared to those involving men.
Oh yeah.
If you think Greece was already insane, you haven't seen anything yet, my son. Welcome to Rome, where you could find some of the widest sexual culture imaginable. One famous example of this was Emperor Hadrian's relationship with the Greek youth Antinous. When Antinous died, Hadrian built a temple in his honor and even named a city after him. Antinous was even featured on coin, something normally reserved only for emperor or heirs to the throne. The thing is, Roman didn't view sexuality the way modern society does. Instead, they view it through penetrator and penetrated role. An ancient Roman man could have sex with almost anyone of lower social status than him. Slave, male prostitute, female prostitute, as long as the free man remained the one in control. The only real boundary was that you couldn't let someone of lower status dominate you. This even led to Emperor Nero marrying a male slave and having him castrated. Roman women were also part of this, with the most famous example being the poet Sulpicia. Her poetry even includes lines that celebrate relationship between women. Even within the imperial family, Augustus' granddaughter was reportedly known for same-sex relationship with women. She was swiftly punished, highlighting how men enjoy sexual freedom while women were far more restricted. Ultimately, Romans didn't categorize sexuality by gender. They saw it as simply as an act. And what mattered the most was status, class, and who you were doing it with.
Oh my god, bro. Oh, hell no, man. What the?
Ancient Egypt is among the earliest civilization with the evidence of same-sex relationship. The Tumakunahotep and Niqur-Khnum circa 2400 BC proved this, with image of two men making physical contact with each other. There are even inscriptions like the one shown in the image that support the interpretation. This suggests that the ancient Egyptians were relatively open about this and didn't hide it. They were buried together in a private tomb and both held high-ranking position in the royal court. Same-sex teams are also discussed in the Westcar Papyrus, which date to the Second Intermediate period. Its content involves a spiritual tale in which the pharaoh is seduced by another man. So what about women? We don't have much evidence, but there are hints of women, such as princesses, living together in a temple setting. Although whether they had sexual relationship remain unclear. Historians suggest that same-sex relation at the time may have also been connected to religious practices. Others argue that it was not prominent enough to be widely recorded or publicly discussed.
Oh yeah.
Native people of America had gender diversity concepts that were ahead of their time. Before much of it was destroyed by European colonization. The widely used term for this is Two-Spirit. This term reflects the gender diversity within indigenous community in America and is what formally adopted in the 90s. We also have the term athlete used to describe individuals who embody both masculine and feminine quality. They were recognized as a distinct individual and often held important role in spiritual ceremony. Next is Wente, a term for a man who adopts a female social role. Alaha and woman are terms for men and women who live in role opposites to their assigned gender. Finally, Lamana refers to individuals assigned male at birth who live in a female role, often taking on work such as art or priestly duty. In the Aztec Empire, there were individuals who embody both masculine and feminine role, with some serving as priests. And this is where it's become crucial. This gender diversity was deliberately suppressed and erased. The Catholic Church, colonial government, and resident school were used to suppress two-spirit tradition. Children were taken from their family and harshly punished for expressing their indigenous cultural identity. The trauma of this continued to this day, and modern native community are working to reclaim and revive two-spirit tradition. Many scholars of indigenous study caution against interpreting two-spirit identity to a Western land, because it differs significantly in terms of spiritual and cultural perspective. But precisely because of those differences, it became a target of suppression by Western colonizers. Japan is an interesting case, as it developed its own framework for understanding gender and sexuality. Terms like onagata and wakashu clearly reflect this system. We also made a video briefly covering of this term, so check it out. Wakashu were adolescent boys who occupy an in-between social category between adult men and women. They were often the focus of adult man desire and became associated with same-sex relationships of that period, and held a defined place within a Japanese cultural aesthetic and social norm. Onagata were male performers who dressed and acted as women in theatrical performance, but their role extended far beyond the stage. Onagata was seen as a symbol of feminine beauty and were often patronized with aristocratic men. Some Onagata also had relationship with women, although I'm not sure whether that would be considered homosexual. In 19th century, Japan modernized and adopted Western culture, which led to a major change in its social structure. Meiji government later criminalized same-sex relations through strict legal reform. Interestingly, Japan didn't frame same-sex relation in moral or religious terms. It was largely treated as a cultural norm. It even shocked foreigner visitors such as Korean envoy who traveled there. Even in religious terms, Buddhism and Shinto did not necessarily view same-sex relation as sinful or abnormal. What about women? Terms like nyonyo or onabe were used for women who took on a masculine role. They were widely documented during the Edo period and were not socially stigmatized. Much of the disruption is often attributed to the spread of Christianity. Missionaries often view native culture as incompatible with or sinful under their religious belief. This contributes to suppression of indigenous culture under the colonial rule. More specifically, this includes forced education, criminalization, and in some cases, arrest and physical abuse. And for why Christianity carry out this action? That's a difficult question because the church's view on sexuality have changed significantly over time. However, by the time European colonialism, homosexuality was seen as filthy and had to be eradicated. The suppression was so strong that when we read historical account of same-sex relationship today, we often interpret them through later moral judgment. Even though it was a reality that had always existed in those societies. That is why the saying holds true: history is written by the victory.